Every time we visited family, he made my wife feel small, like she had to earn her place just for having a job, wearing what she liked, or visiting her parents. I stayed quiet until he insulted her one last time. That day I snapped, and no one saw it coming. I knew I was in for a weird ride the moment I married into my wife's family. But back then, I was too in love to care. You hear people joke about in-laws all the time, awkward dinners, strange traditions, a little bit of gossip. But no one ever tells you about the uncle. That one uncle who makes it his life's purpose to gatekeep culture like he's guarding some ancient scroll of outdated nonsense. For me, that guy's my wife's uncle. Let's call him Uncle R. He's not even a blood relative of mine. But somehow, he's been living rent-free in my head for years now. And I wish I was being dramatic. When my wife and I got married, I knew her family was more traditional than mine, which was fine. I respected that. I tried. I really did. But Uncle R? He's not just traditional. He's a one-man morality committee with a PhD in condescension. At first, I thought maybe I was just being sensitive. Maybe I was the one overreacting. Maybe it's just how elders are sometimes, stuck in their ways, a little passive-aggressive. I could roll with that. But then I noticed something that kept repeating like clockwork. It wasn't the subtle jokes or the offhand comments. It was the pattern. Every single woman who married into the family, he treated them like they had something to prove, like they weren't good enough, not unless they followed some invisible checklist only he knew existed. It started with my cousin-in-law, Sana, sweetest woman I've ever met. Soft-spoken, incredibly smart. She's a biomedical researcher, for crying out loud. She married into the family 2 years before me, and I remember watching her face subtly change whenever Uncle R was in the room. At one dinner, he looked right at her plate and went, "Oh, you don't cook with turmeric?" Back in our time, women understood the value of flavor. She just smiled, that polite, tight-lipped kind of smile you give when someone's being rude and you don't want to start drama. That was his thing. He never yelled, never raised his voice. But the weight behind every sentence, it was like he was handing out moral report cards with every word. And eventually it was my turn. My wife and I had barely been married 6 months. We were still figuring each other out, adjusting to married life, merging cultures, dealing with work, family expectations, everything. We got invited to a small family lunch. Nothing huge, just a casual get-together. But I could already feel the tension in my wife's shoulders as we parked outside the house. "Is Uncle R here?" she asked. What? She just sighed. And I didn't understand it back then, but God, I do now. We walked in, greeted everyone, and not even 10 minutes later, Uncle R walks over, glances at my wife, and goes, "Still working those long hours, Don't tire yourself out. The home needs energy too, Just like that. "No, how are you?" "No, I hope work's going well." Just that. I laughed it off, tried to brush it aside, told myself he probably didn't mean anything by it. But over time, the comments kept piling up. "If you want a happy husband, you must learn his tastes." Back in our days, women wouldn't talk back like that. "I heard you spent the weekend with your parents. That's nice. But your home is here now. And the worst part? He said it in front of everyone, like it was normal." I looked around, waiting for someone to say something, but all I saw were polite nods, awkward glances, tight smiles. No one ever pushed back. Everyone just tolerated it. At first, my wife told me to let it go, that he was just old-fashioned, that it wasn't worth making a scene over. So I did. For months, I kept my mouth shut, smiled through gritted teeth, watched this man treat every single daughter-in-law like she was on trial for being too modern, too educated, too independent. It was like he was stuck in the 50s, desperately trying to drag everyone else back with him. But then things hit a turning point. It was at my cousin's engagement party, a big, beautiful event. Lots of energy, lots of laughter, for everyone except Uncle R. I watched him corner the bride-to-be, this bright, confident woman with dreams of becoming a civil rights lawyer, and basically tell her she should soften her personality if she wanted to be respected in the family. I froze. She laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but you could see the hurt, and something inside me just cracked. That night on the drive home, I looked at my wife and said, "How long are we going to pretend this is okay?" She didn't answer at first, just stared out the window. Then she said something I'll never forget. Everyone knows he's like this, but no one wants to be the one to start the fight. And that's the problem, isn't it? Uncle R built himself a throne of silence. He weaponized tradition and respect so well that no one dared challenge him, not without becoming the bad guy. But what happens when silence becomes permission? What happens when one man's outdated opinions turn into the unspoken rulebook for the entire family? What happens when I become complicit just by saying nothing? I didn't have the answers then, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending, because I watched my wife, this brilliant, strong, kind-hearted woman, slowly start shrinking at family events, laughing a little less, speaking a little softer, and I couldn't take it anymore. There's a limit to how long you can bottle something up before it starts to spill, quietly, then violently. And mine was about to pour. I didn't plan to confront him. Honestly, I didn't even think I had it in me. I'm not the make-a-scene kind of guy. I hate drama. I hate unnecessary attention. But the more I saw my wife deflate around him, the more I realized staying quiet wasn't the neutral choice I thought it was. It was surrender, and I was starting to feel like a coward in my own skin. The tipping point came a few weeks later. We were invited to a family dinner again. My wife was hesitant, but her mom insisted. So it would mean a lot if we came, that Uncle R was trying to be more open-minded. Whatever that meant, I knew better, but I agreed to go for her. When we walked into the house, everything looked normal. Kids running around, cousins laughing in the kitchen, the smell of biryani in the air. Familiar chaos, the kind of atmosphere that should have felt warm, but didn't. Because the moment Uncle R spotted us from across the room, I felt my chest tighten. He smiled that smug, slow grin, the kind that made you feel like a child walking into a principal's office. And he didn't waste any time. We barely sat down when he leaned over the table and said, "So, when are you two planning to start a family? Time's ticking." There it was. No, how's work? No, how have you both been? Just straight into our bedroom decisions like it was casual conversation. I froze. My wife gave a tight smile. "We're not in a rush." He chuckled. "I'm not in a rush. That's what all the modern girls say until it's too late." She went quiet, and I just snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough. I leaned forward, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Maybe it's not your place to comment on something that personal." The whole table went quiet. Even the background noise seemed to hush, like the house itself held its breath. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me." I didn't flinch. "You heard me." There was a pause, just a second or two, but it felt like a lifetime. Then he laughed. That fake, dismissive kind of laugh. Young people these days are so sensitive. "No," I said. "We're just tired of being talked down to." My wife squeezed my hand under the table, tightly. Her eyes didn't leave her plate. Uncle R looked around the table, waiting for someone to back him up. No one did, but no one said anything either. Just silence. And silence can feel a lot like betrayal when you're hoping someone, anyone, will speak up. He stood up, muttered something about needing fresh air, and walked outside. The room shifted. People started whispering, plates clinked. My wife excused herself to the bathroom, and I just sat there, heart pounding, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just done. That night, we drove home in silence. She didn't say a word the entire ride. And when we finally parked in front of our place, she just stared out the windshield and whispered, "You shouldn't have said that." I turned to her. "What? You made it worse," she said. "Now everyone's going to say I turned you against him." I blinked. "You didn't turn me against him. He did that all by himself." She looked at me, and I swear, for a second, she looked like she was about to cry. "You don't get it," she whispered. "This isn't like your family. My family doesn't call people out. They let things go, even if it hurts." "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why should we let it go when he hurts you every time we see him?" She looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Because no one else will stand up. And I don't want to be the reason everyone picks sides." And that hit me in a place I didn't know existed. Because she wasn't wrong. In that house, silence was loyalty, and loyalty mattered more than dignity. After that night, things changed. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. We weren't uninvited from events, but we stopped being included in the real sense. Conversations would hush when we walked in. People would shoot glances. There was this tension, like everyone was waiting for me to explode again. Even her mother started calling less. Shorter texts. Less warmth. Uncle R, meanwhile, oh, he played it like a master manipulator. Didn't say a single negative word, at least not in front of us. But he turned himself into the wounded party. Told the rest of the family that I was disrespectful, that I challenged his wisdom in front of everyone, that I was trying to drive a wedge between the generations. And no one wanted to pick sides. So they picked silence again. My wife and I started fighting more. Not because we didn't love each other. We did. Still do. But because that man's words and everyone else's silence had wormed their way into our marriage. Every dinner became a debate. Every event was a minefield. And in the middle of all of it, I kept thinking, how does one person hold this much power over so many people? And the answer? Because he's been doing it for decades. Slowly, quietly, with smiles and scripture and guilt. He tells women to cook more and speak less. He praises obedience like it's a badge of honor. He rewrites every little choice, career, independence, even joy, as disrespect. And then he hides behind his age like a shield. It's just how I was raised. We're from a different time. It's not personal, but it is personal. It's always been personal. It's personal when my wife second-guesses what she wears to a family dinner. It's personal when she texts her mom 3 times before visiting her own parents, just to make sure Uncle R won't make another snide comment. It's personal when she stops laughing too loud or cuts off her story halfway through because someone gave her a look across the table. It's all so personal, and no one wants to admit it, because admitting it would mean facing the fact that they've allowed this man to control the emotional thermostat of the entire family. And me? I was starting to realize that not pushing back had its own consequences, because silence doesn't just protect the guilty. It punishes the honest, and I was done staying quiet. It wasn't supposed to go down like that. I kept telling myself that, over and over, because the day everything blew up wasn't even about me. It started with a wedding. My wife's younger cousin, sweet girl, marrying a guy she met at university. He seemed like a solid dude. Smart, respectful, a little awkward in crowds, but clearly adored her. And honestly, that was enough for me. The wedding was this huge, colorful, chaotic event, the kind of thing you mentally prep for like a marathon. Family flying in from everywhere. Music, noise, layers of tradition stacked on top of each other like some sacred performance no one dared mess with. And right there, front and center, like clockwork, was Uncle R, dressed in an expensive sherwani he absolutely didn't pay for, handing out unsolicited wisdom like party favors. At first, I told myself I'd just keep my head down, smile, nod, avoid him. But he was circling the room like a hawk, scanning the crowd for behavior he deemed inappropriate or unbecoming or whatever ancient nonsense he subscribed to. And then he found his target, the bride. She was laughing loudly with her college friends near the buffet, just being young, radiant, happy. And he didn't like that. I was across the hall when I saw it happen. The moment he slid next to her and leaned in with that fake fatherly tone he used when he wanted to mask something sharp. I couldn't hear his exact words, but I saw her smile falter, then fade, then vanish. She excused herself a few seconds later and walked off toward the bathrooms, her friend following close behind. And I knew what he'd done. I walked over to my wife, who was helping arrange the seating chart for some last-minute guests, and I said, I think he upset her. She didn't even ask who. She just sighed, quietly. And that silence? That was my last straw. I found him standing by the drinks table, talking to another uncle about how kids these days don't respect family structure. And I didn't even pause. I walked right up, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, What did you say to her? He blinked, surprised. I'm sorry. The bride, I said. You said something. She looked upset. What did you say? He smirked. I was just giving her some advice. You would understand. You're still learning what it means to be part of a real family. That did it. I felt my pulse in my throat. Don't talk to me about real families, I said, low and sharp. Real families don't make their daughters feel small on their wedding day. He laughed, that smug, dismissive laugh again. You modern boys think respect means letting women run wild. And before he could finish, I cut him off. No, we think respect means listening. Respect means not policing every woman who walks into this family. Respect means not making my wife feel like she's failing because she chose to be more than your version of a servant. The entire section of the hall went quiet. I could feel eyes turning toward us. Someone dropped a spoon. He leaned in, voice tight. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "You did that years ago." The rest of us just stopped calling it out. That hit him. He stood there for a second, frozen. Then he straightened his back and said loudly, "This is what happens when boys marry girls with no culture." And I swear I saw red. Before I could speak, I felt my wife's hand on my arm. She had tears in her eyes, but not from fear, from rage. She turned to him, not me, and said, "Say that again. Say it to my face." His mouth opened, but no words came out, because I don't think he expected her to speak. Not her, not the quiet one, not the one who always played along to keep the peace. She wasn't quiet anymore. "You've spent your whole life trying to make women feel small," she said, her voice steady. "And we've let you, because we didn't want to upset the family dynamic. But what about the dynamic you've upset? What about the women you've hurt with your judgment? What about the girls you've silenced with your outdated garbage?" He looked around, desperate for someone to back him up. But no one moved. Not one. In fact, the bride's father stepped forward. He didn't say anything, just stood next to us. Then the bride herself appeared, eyes red but furious. She joined us too. One by one, people shifted in our direction, quiet, tentative but certain. And for the first time in what felt like ever, Uncle R looked alone. He muttered something under his breath and stormed out. No one followed him, not even his own son. In the quiet that followed, I felt heavy, not victorious, not triumphant, just exhausted. Because this wasn't some dramatic win. This wasn't a movie scene where the villain is defeated and the credits roll. This was years, decades, of damage finally bubbling to the surface. And we were all standing in the mess. That night, my wife and I sat in bed, still dressed, still wired, too tired to sleep, and she whispered, "Do you think we made a mistake?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I think we finally told the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I think we both believed it." It's been almost a year since that night. The wedding, the confrontation, the moment the room finally stopped pretending and everything cracked open. Sometimes it still feels unreal, like I'm watching it happen in slow motion from somewhere outside my body. But then I remember the silence afterward. And that's when it hits me, it was real, and not everyone was ready for it. After the wedding, things changed, not instantly, not explosively, just subtly. Phone calls became shorter. Invitations slowed. Some cousins messaged us on the side to say they were proud or glad someone said something, but they didn't say it out loud to anyone else. That part stung the most. It wasn't just Uncle R's reaction I had to deal with. It was the silence of the people we thought would stand with us. People who knew better. People who'd been hurt by him too. But when it came time to take a side, they chose safety over solidarity. At first, I was angry, furious, even. I wanted to shake them and scream, "Why do you let him do this to all of us?" But over time, I started to understand something I hadn't before. Silence isn't always agreement. Sometimes it's survival. Because for a lot of them, pushing back meant risking more than just awkward dinners or cold shoulders. It meant possibly losing support, being cut off, becoming the next target. And I get that now. But still, that doesn't mean I regret what we did. Not even a little. Because for the first time, my wife stopped shrinking. She started laughing louder again, wearing what she wanted at family events, visiting her parents without texting 3 different people to make sure Uncle R wouldn't be there. She looked lighter. And that, for me, was everything. We did keep our distance for a while, especially from big gatherings. Not out of fear, just peace. Sometimes peace looks like saying no to invitations, or skipping a family dinner, or choosing your own sanity over someone else's comfort. But slowly, quietly, things began to shift. It started with small things. My wife's cousin, the one who got married, invited us for dinner a few months later. No fanfare, just a few close people. No Uncle R. We went, and it felt good, easy. She hugged us both and said, "Thank you. You have no idea what you gave me that day." And I believed her, because I could see it. She was walking taller, more sure of herself, less filtered. It spread little by little. More women in the family stopped apologizing for working late, for not cooking every single night, for speaking up, for being themselves. Uncle R? He sulked, of course, pulled his usual guilt-tripping tactics, told people he was disrespected and humiliated at that wedding. And you know what? For a while, people nodded. They patted his back, let him play the victim. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became. He wasn't protecting culture. He was preserving control. And people were finally starting to see the difference. His words lost weight. His presence stopped being the final word in every room. And eventually, even he noticed. One day, at a family event we did attend, he tried to pull my wife aside again. Some comment about her dress being too bold or whatever nonsense he had lined up. But this time, her mom stepped in, just stood in front of him and said, "Not today." I looked at my wife. She didn't even flinch. She just smiled. And I swear in that moment, I saw every past version of her. The quiet girl who used to nod and take it. The tense woman who'd rehearse every sentence before a dinner. The wife who once cried in our car because she felt like a disappointment to people who barely knew her. All fade away. What was left was just her. Whole, unapologetic, free. And me? I finally felt like I'd done something that mattered. Not in a grand, hero moment kind of way, but in the quiet way that shifts something real. People still talk, of course. Some say we stirred the pot. Others say we embarrassed the family. A few probably think we'll regret speaking up. But here's the truth. Regret isn't in my vocabulary anymore. Not when I look at my wife and see her shoulders relaxed instead of tensed. Not when I hear her laugh without checking who's watching. Not when I watch her hold our daughter. We had a daughter, and know she'll never have to ask us for permission to be herself. That's what changed everything for me. Because the moment I held her, our little girl, I realized there's no way in hell I'm letting her grow up thinking silence equals respect. Or that tradition means losing yourself. Or that love is measured by how much you tolerate. She's going to know what dignity feels like, what freedom feels like. And I'll be damned if I ever let another uncle or make her feel like she needs to shrink to fit in. So no, I don't regret what we did. If anything, I wish we'd done it sooner. Because sometimes telling the truth doesn't fix everything overnight. But it's the first step to building something honest. And I'd rather live with consequences than live under quiet control. If you've ever had to choose between keeping peace or protecting someone you love, you get it. Hit subscribe for more stories just like this.